I hope that a lot of people see this video because we're going to be covering a very serious, very important topic that's been national news lately, but it extends to a lot more cases than just this one. There are a lot of cases just like this that don't get nearly as much media attention, and it is the result of a family's dedication to finding their missing daughter that got the national media this attentive. But there are a couple of people who I specifically hope see this video, and those people are the Laundrie family, Chris Laundrie, Brian Laundrie's father specifically. I want you to know that you are a coward and a menace. And if you had any shred of dignity or respect for human life, you would come forward and admit to what you know, which is a hell of a lot more than you've put forward. I also want the Laundrie family attorney to know that the ceaseless backstepping and backtracking and covering your words is disgusting and it's atrocious. And the fact that you are business partners with Chris Laundrie is just such a breach and violation of legal ethics that I can't even begin to get into it. Finally, the law enforcement involved, the Northport Police and the FBI, where were you the night that Brian left? Why were you not watching his house? I understand that without a body, without physical evidence, you could not arrest him, you could not charge him, but why was nobody sitting out in the street watching the house? Why wasn't anybody paying attention to make sure that this person, the last person to see Gabby Petito alive, didn't leave? Or if he did leave, why didn't anybody follow him? Was nobody paying attention? Who screwed this up? Was it the FBI? Was it the Northport Police? Who did it? Because his parents are clearly complicit. The lawyer is complicit. Who allowed this young man to just wander off into the wilderness, leaving his car, his phone, his wallet, and the police just didn't have any idea where he was until his parents came forward and said, "Oh, well, we think he went here." Who screwed up? So, just to reiterate, Chris Laundrie, the Laundrie family attorney, I don't know his name, and whoever the hell is in charge of this investigation. Why? And I hope to God you see this video, and I hope it digs something out of your rotting, useless souls to do the right thing. I'm Aidan Mattis, and welcome to the Lore Lodge. So that intro was probably pretty intense, and that was on purpose. I have begun to feel a very personal connection to this case, and while our Saturday episodes are usually about folklore or monsters or something religious, something along those lines, this one, there was breaking news over the last 2 days. I spoke with Gabby Petito's family today, and for context, it is October 22nd, 2021 right now, as of filming this video. I am going to go through the disappearance of Gabby Petito from when it started on August 25th, 2021, through the discovery of the remains of Brian Laundrie, according to the FBI, just yesterday, October 21st, this 2-month span when this occurred. And I'm doing this because this has become a very personal issue for me. I have a couple of younger sisters who I can only imagine what it would be like if they were to disappear and if something like this were to happen to them. I have been in touch, like I said, with Gabby's family. They reached out to me personally back before this hit the news. I was one of the first people to talk about this story. I am eternally grateful for everyone who follows me on TikTok and YouTube and Instagram for getting the word out about this case. It is deeply unfortunate that Gabby was not found alive, but the mobilization that I saw from my follower base just really does fascinate me. It warms my heart. This was an incredible response from you guys, and I am deeply grateful, and I'm sure that the Petito family is grateful as well. So you guys have been fantastic. But like I said, kind of a breaking news issue. We were going to do a lore video, but we pushed that to next week. So today I just want to go through the story for you. And it starts on August 25th, which is the last time that anybody other than Brian Laundrie saw Gabby Petito alive. If I remember correctly, she FaceTimed her mother. There is an Instagram post that I believe dates to August 15th. I also believe, if I remember correctly, that they said they spoke to her on the phone on August 27th, and then they received a text message from her phone that they said they did not believe was her on the 30th or the 31st of August. Now, to give you some background, if you don't know the story here, Gabby Petito and her then fiance, Brian Laundrie, were doing a van life trip. They were traveling through the national parks, and this is kind of how this caught my attention because of the content of my pages. Her brother is one of my followers, and he brought it to my attention because this is in my wheelhouse. So they were doing a trip up through the national parks, and they were out in Utah and then went up into Wyoming, into Grand Teton National Park, and that is where she disappeared. Now, along the way, there was one point where they were stopped by police, and there's a video showing Gabby very emotional and Brian very just stone-faced. He's very calm, very rational. And Gabby is clearly in distress. They were clearly having an argument of some sort, and she was not handling it well. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not going to try and analyze what happened in that video, but clearly there was some tension in the relationship, and I'm not familiar with them. I don't know how their relationship was, but clearly something had them on edge, which is understandable considering that, they were spending 24 hours a day together driving in a van. But at some point, when they were in Grand Teton, sometime between the 25th and the 31st, Gabby went missing. Now, there's a dark period in terms of, there's radio silence, so to speak, from August 31st at the latest through September 11th. Gabby's family discovered that Brian had returned home with the van on September 10th or 11th. It is believed that Brian actually did return home closer to the 6th and then went to a campground with his family. Brian does not report Gabby missing. Brian's family refuses to speak to the Petito family. They immediately lawyer up, and at this point, the Petito family files a missing persons report for Gabby. Once it is revealed that Brian has returned and Gabby is not with him, and Brian refuses to speak about where Gabby was. So immediately, Brian is a person of interest, but he's not considered a suspect. He refuses to talk to police. His family refuses to talk to police. They do everything through their lawyer. Their lawyer is a business partner of Brian's father, Chris Laundrie, and they just totally stonewall everything. Had Brian actually been a suspect, I believe this would be considered obstruction of justice, the extent to which they just hid everything. September 13th, the police went into the Laundrie home, and Brian was not there. They questioned the parents, who said they didn't know where Brian was. Brian's belongings had been left there, and his car and the van. The van was impounded, his car was still there, and all that was missing was some of Brian's camping supplies. So for days, essentially, they just tried to figure out what was going on. I believe it was a Tuesday that he disappeared. His parents didn't report him missing until Friday, and what they said was that they thought that he went into a nearby nature preserve, and the police started combing the nature preserve looking for him. So the missing persons report was filed the 11th, and Gabby's remains were found on the 19th. Of course, Brian disappeared around the 13th, and then her remains were found while he was on the run. Initially, they reported him missing and tried to frame this as he had gone missing as well. Gabby's family from the get-go was very clear that they don't believe that Brian is missing. They believe that Brian is in hiding, and I personally agree with that sentiment. Brian's family's lawyer throughout this entire thing has been evasive. He has been unhelpful. He has been giving these empty words of, we're sorry this happened and this is a tragedy, and the entire Laundrie family is mourning for Gabby's death. But in reality, it seems that the Laundrie family is covering for Brian's whereabouts. The fact that, again, he went missing on a Tuesday and that was not reported missing until a Friday under the circumstances is mind-boggling, and it reeks of lies, of somebody saying that, of his parents knowing that he was leaving and giving him time to run. Now, this past week, again, as of recording, it is October 22nd, 2021. This past week, remains were found. In fact, I believe they were found yesterday, October 21st. Remains were found in Myakkahatchee Creek Environmental Park, I believe is the name of the preserve. And this is where Brian was where his parents said he may have gone. Now, the police and the FBI have been combing this area. It was flooded for a while, but they've been combing this area since basically late September, September 20th or so. And eventually, Brian's parents were allowed to assist in the search. But yesterday, October 21st, his parents went in after some of this area that had been flooded had resurfaced. Brian's parents went in and they found Brian's campsite as well as a bag nearby that was bone dry with what appeared to be a notebook in it and some human remains, skeletal remains. It took them about 30 minutes. Police and FBI combed this area for a month and found nothing. Brian's parents walked in and within 30 minutes found his campsite and his remains. And if you want to tell me, I'm sorry, it makes me furious. If you want to tell me that that's normal, that's, just a coincidence, then I have a bridge to sell you. If you think that his parents didn't know exactly where that campsite was going to be for some reason or another, be it that they planted the evidence or that they dropped him off there, that they, if Brian was ever at that campsite, his parents knew where it was because they found it so fast. And if you believe that this is, legit, that his parents just had this intuition that that's where Brian's remains and his campsite were, probably the type of person who believes Epstein actually killed himself. That's probably the type of person you are. And this is not conspiracy theory. It takes so much more imagination and so much more stretching the truth to pretend that Brian Laundrie's disappearance is anything but a setup than it does to look at this and go, oh my God, that's fake. Because to find in an area that was flooded, to find that his bag and its contents were bone dry, to find his belongings, and, this is all just totally fine. Oh, by the way, known alligator area that is known for having alligators. You want me to believe that this guy who was a avid outdoorsman who spent his life hiking and doing van life and traveling around the country, you're telling me that a nature preserve in his hometown, he decided that the place to set up his camp to hide out away from, prying eyes was in the middle of an alligator swamp? And I don't, there's people out there who I see and they comment on my TikToks or whatever, or on Facebook posts about it. And I see them and they're like, oh, well, he went out there to commit suicide. And I'm like, all right, lots of ways to commit suicide that aren't death by alligator. Nobody chooses to get eaten by an alligator. That is a horrible way to die. It takes a long time. It's extremely painful. Nobody chooses to do that, especially not somebody who is as much of a narcissist as Brian Laundrie appears to be. If you look into the people who knew him, who worked with him, all of the testimony about this young man says that he was narcissistic, says that he was full of himself, and there is no way that this guy walked into an alligator swamp. to kill himself. Furthermore, the same day that his remains are found, it is confirmed they're his remains. That never happens in cases where it's not like abundantly clear, like a gunshot wound, and they have the family come in and ID the body immediately. And it wasn't that they found, an arm that had one of his tattoos on it. No, they confirmed his identity through dental records. They said his remains were skeletonized after, keep in mind, if he went missing on September 13th and they found him on October 21st, that is less than 2 months. That is a month and a half. That's about 6 weeks. To skeletonize in 6 weeks? Yeah, the conditions in Florida make that a little bit more likely than, say, the Canadian tundra or a desert. But that is fast to skeletonize. And from what I understand, what they found was a skull fragment with the teeth still in the jaw. They also say that his body appeared to have been dismembered and that limbs and pieces were scattered around the area, which implies to them that it was an alligator attack. Now, what I haven't heard confirmed yet is whether the bones themselves had bite marks on them. That's something that I feel like would have been made abundantly clear if you were saying alligator attack. Because, as we know, when people die by being bitten by a predator, there are often marks on their bones. If people are stabbed or hacked with an axe, usually there's a mark on the bones. Hell, when people are cannibalized, like at Jamestown, there was evidence that people had been using sharp instruments to cut away at flesh on the bones. So where's that evidence? Why haven't I seen pictures of the crime scene? Of the, not even crime scene, of the campsite? Why is why is it all so shadowy? And why confirm via dental records when you have bones? And even more so, if for the people that have suggested that I'm wrong, that I heard this wrong, and that there is actual tissue, you can get DNA from that. Why are we not waiting for the DNA test? Why are we going off of a partial dental record? That doesn't make sense. And I have information that I can't share as of right now. I'm sure it'll come out in the next few days, the next week. But I have information regarding those dental records that throws their validity deeply into question. And, people have faked dental records before. This has appeared as a trope in multiple television and movie programs. The idea that you can fake dental records is not something outlandish, especially if you have the money and the connections to do so. And the Laundries do have the money and the connections to do so. But obviously, for the sake of the investigation and the confidentiality of my sources on this, because I have a broad range of sources here, I've had a lot of people connected to this case reach out to me, but I cannot give identities for obvious reasons. But the dental records issue, you will see in the next few days, in the next week, it can't be trusted. It absolutely cannot be trusted. That said, that's where we are now. My personal belief in all of this is that Brian either purposefully or accidentally killed Gabby. The cause of death was homicide by strangulation. In the movies, they make strangulation seem like something that takes a few seconds. Strangulation, strangling somebody to death, is a deeply personal method of killing somebody. It is something that only occurs in a very aggressive physical altercation, and it's hard to do. It requires a ton of force exerted all around the neck, because you need to get the blood vessels as well as the windpipe, and you need to hold that. And keep in mind, somebody can go without oxygen for 2-3 minutes before they start to pass out. That means that Brian, who I see no other possibility for what happened here, because if somebody else had, come into their campsite and strangled Gabby, then Brian would have run away and called the police. So what it seems to me, the only conclusion I can draw from this, given the available evidence, is that Brian strangled Gabby to death. And I'm sorry, I meant to make this a very objective, factual, non-biased account, but I am livid. I have trouble talking about this without getting vehemently angry. But Brian, in my opinion, absolutely is responsible for what happened to Gabby. At the very least, he is responsible for her family having to go through those weeks of anguish where they had no idea where she was, where they were worrying to find out, was she dead or alive? He knew. He knew she was dead. He knew she was dead from the moment he left her. And whether he killed her or not, he forced that family to go through pain that nobody should ever have to go through. As always, it's possible that I'm wrong. I'm not right about everything. It could be that they test the bone marrow, or they find a way to get DNA off that campsite, and it comes back, and it's Brian. And in that case, I obviously I would have no evidence to suggest otherwise. That is pretty definitive. And if that does come back, if the DNA comes back and it was Brian in that swamp, then those alligators did God's work. But the reason I am hesitant, the reason I am so insistent on being skeptical of this, is because the last thing I want to see is the general public just accept that was Brian Laundrie's body, and that both Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie are dead. Meanwhile, Brian is off gallivanting in some country that won't extradite to the US, like Cuba or Mexico or Greece. As far as those who are familiar with what's going on in a very intimate way, Brian's family, his sister, Cassie, his father, Chris, and I believe his mother's name is Rebecca, who scrubbed their social media. You can't even find out where they worked on LinkedIn, because I looked. Because I wanted to reach out to them to see if they had anything to say regarding this to their lawyer, Mr. Bertolino. I can't say for sure if his sister, Cassie, was involved, but his parents, his mother and his father, Chris and Rebecca. And I'm going to say it to Chris specifically because I do believe that the actions of sons are reflective of the parenting of fathers. Chris, you are a coward. You are a sad, poor, horrid excuse for a man. Because you watched your son drive up in his girlfriend's van without her, and you didn't have the fucking stones to report it to the police. You didn't have the stones. You did not have anything within you which allowed you to stand up and say, I know he's my family, but justice needs to be served. Because I guarantee you, if a single man in my family did something like that, his father would have him by the ear being dragged into the police station the moment he didn't have an answer for where the hell Gabby was. Physically would be dragged into the police station. And it would be done with love and with hope that this was all a great big misunderstanding, but it absolutely would be done, because that is what any real father, any real man would do. But instead, Chris, you went to your business partner, you went and cried to your lawyer, and you had him fabricate some BS story so you could hide your son away. And whether you let Brian go into that swamp, or whether you put him on a private boat and shuffled him off to Cuba, I don't know. But you, Christopher Laundrie, you know what happened. And every minute you do not spend telling the police, telling Gabby's family, helping us figure out this story so we can put it to rest, is a moment that you are hurting people. Is a moment that you are keeping Gabby's family in an unimaginable deal of pain while they wait to see if they will ever get answers for what happened to their daughter. So this video is addressed to you, Chris Laundrie. And you probably won't see it. But all I can say is I hope that the fanciful version of hell created by Dante Alighieri is real. And I hope you get into the deepest circle you possibly can. So, obviously, some intense subject matter today. That is what it is. I think that it needed to be said. I think that this case is not over, but I think that what is most important about this, because the fact of the matter is that Gabby is gone. Whether Brian is gone, whether his family ever comes forward, the one thing that is for certain is that Gabby is gone, that she appears to have been a victim of domestic abuse, and her family has created the Gabby Petito Foundation, and you can go to their website. You can look up GabbyPetitoFoundation.com. The link to all of that will be in my description for this video. I will also add it to the link tree, the card that we share on every video, that aidanmattis.card.co. I strongly recommend following them on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, wherever you can. And if you are able to help out, then that is fantastic. But yeah, it's, again, that link will be in the description of this video. And if you have any questions about the case, feel free to comment them below. If you have questions about Foundation, feel free to comment them below. I can always reach out to her family and get exact answers for you about the Foundation and about how they're going to be spending money, how they're going to be raising awareness, what they plan to do. I personally am going to be writing my congressman, my congresswoman, as well as a state congressman that I know in Pennsylvania, to recommend the adoption of a law in Pennsylvania that would combat this. I'll have more details on that later, but that would provide police with the resources necessary to monitor these situations more closely, so that a situation like Brian Laundrie disappearing while being the last person to see Gabby alive can't happen again. So I very much encourage you to write your congresspeople to suggest such laws, such regulations, ask them what they plan to do to combat cases like this in the future. And of course, finally, once more, check out Gabby Petito Foundation. If you just look that up on Google, you're going to find it, and the link will be in the description of this video. I'm Aidan Mattis, and thanks for stopping by the Lord Lodge.